Hello. I'm not addressing this video like I normally start out at. A few months not too long ago, I attended a funeral of a man who was responsible for saving my life and others many times. The man I'm referring to is Sergeant Carl Gray, United States Air Force. Sergeant Gray was head of security for the mind-altering research study back when I was an unfortunate test subject when I was a young soldier in the service. When I got drug into the mind-altering research study in June of 1984. And then when I got out in 87, I'm not sure how many years I was a test subject for the mind-altering research study as well as other umbrella projects. And I'm not sure how many years that Sergeant Gray was head of security, except that I believe he got out of the security part of it in 1986. He was one of the guys that escorted Dr. Gorman to prison after Dr. Gorman was involved with something that didn't involve us, apparently involved some other folks, and 9 people died as a result of Dr. Gorman's actions. And anyway, what had happened was they decided they'd had enough of them. Many people, General Moore, General Benary, General Sperry, a lot of people had tried to get Dr. Gorman out of that position because he was just so sadistic, he was so twisted, and there was many soldiers that either end up brain fried during testing and ended up in mental institutions, or they died in testing and their families were told fairy tales, as you've heard me say before. Well, they decided they'd had enough. 9 people died in this one particular episode, and I never did find out what it was. Sergeant Gray told me this. And including in the 9 people that died was 2 security personnel. And they decided they'd had enough. And they took him up to a federal court, and they were going to give him 37 years, and Dr. Gorman said, okay, that's fine, but I'm still allowed my defense. And when I get on the stand, I'm going to tell it all. Where did the money come from? Who authorized it? I'm going to be naming names. And so they backpedaled, they plea bargained it down, and he got 13 years, and he went to Leavenworth. And Sergeant Gray was one of those that escorted him there. And then later on, Sergeant Gray got out of the Air Force in 1989 after serving 15 years. So who was Sergeant Gray? Sergeant Gray, later on in years, ended up becoming a good friend of mine. I got involved in a kind of unique way with his niece, Dorothy Jean. And the reason I'm telling this story is because when I went to his funeral, or his service, Sergeant Gray was cremated. I had told his sister, who was there, Dorothy Sr., I told her one of these days I'd make a video. They did not know. They did not know about what Sergeant Gray did when he was in the Air Force. And just like a lot of people who had been in for that many years, you kind of bounce around, you do various things, and sometimes you get an obscure assignment. Well, Sergeant Gray got an obscure assignment. He was head of security. Sometimes he might have been second command, sometimes he might have been head of the NCOs. But his family did not know. Sergeant Gray's family did not know about what he was involved in, and I'll tell you why. Because Sergeant Gray told me, he said, don't ever tell my family about what happened when I was in the Air Force. The reason was Because if the powers that be believed that Sergeant Gray had told his family about what he did, then they would have been put at danger just as he would have been put at danger. Because I asked him one day, I said, because sometimes he would open up to me, other times he would not. Sometimes he wouldn't even acknowledge I asked a question about all these, crazy memories I was having. And some were horrifying. Many were horrifying. Some he would open up, some he wouldn't acknowledge. Others he just said, just forget about it. Forget about that one. Let it go. Don't even think about it. I'm thinking, how bad could some of these events happen? Some of these tests and some of these projects that I was an unwitting guinea pig for, how bad could they have gotten when Sergeant Gray would come back with a statement like that? Anyway, this picture was taken 15 years ago at his daughter's funeral. I was clean shaven back then. But that's Sergeant Gray. That's Sergeant Gray, guy in the penguin suit. Yeah, how bad did it get? Well, it got so bad that guys got brain fried. End up in mental institutions. Some guys died in testing. One of them, a friend of mine that I served with, a fellow by the name of Tracy Myers. These people are gone now, so I don't care. I'll name names. My buddy Tracy Myers from Anadarko, Oklahoma. Apparently, he was in the projects too. After I got out, well, actually, before I got out, let me back up a step here. I was talking to Tracy, who I used to refer to as Moonshine. That was my nickname for him. And he had given me the phone number to his parents in Anadarko, Oklahoma. Okay, cool. Well, at that time, shortly after I got out, I still had the phone number to my old unit, which was the 503rd Maintenance Company at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I had still had it memorized. I have no idea what that phone number would be now. It's been, 33 years since I got out. But anyway, I had called back to the old barracks, talking to the guys, and said, hey, how's everybody doing? That was years and years and years before I started getting my memory back. And anyway, they said, oh, everybody's doing okay. Well, everybody except for Myers. I said, what happened with Myers? So they chaptered him out. I'm like, my God, what'd he do? And Myers had rented a trailer like a lot of young service members do. He rented a trailer off base, and they said he wouldn't come out of it for 30 days. He wasn't trying to, he didn't go run off and hide. Everybody knew where he was at. For whatever reason, he just refused to come out of his trailer. So they chaptered him out and sent him home. I'm like, wow. Well, shortly after that, I called the number he gave me. And his mom had answered, put him on the phone. He's like, hey, dude, what's going on? We talked for about 20 minutes, just like old times. Cool, man. About 6 months later, I called him. Or it might have been a little longer than that. I called him again. His mom answered, and I said, hey, is Tracy there? No, he's not here. Oh, any idea when he'll be back? She goes, I have no idea. I said, what do you mean? So from what I gather, shortly after I called, this incident happened that I'm about to tell you. She goes, well, about 6 months ago, he went running out of the house stark raving mad. And we haven't seen him since. Wow. What the hell could have happened? Well, when I was getting my memory back years later after I had met Sergeant Gray, I had told him this story. And he goes, yeah. He said, we found him a couple weeks later. He was out in the woods, basically being a hermit. And he said, last I knew, he was still up at a mental hospital in Baltimore. Now, when Sergeant Gray told me this story, after I told him this story, that would have been about 2007, 2008 when that happened. And then word was that Tracy had passed away. Wow. And so Sergeant Gray, one of the many unsung heroes that nobody gets to hear about. Like I say, this video is for his family. And anyway, your brother, your father, was one of the unsung heroes. One of the guys that saved my life about 5 times. When Dr. Gorman, the sadistic Dr. Gorman, was always taking things too far. One of the guys that saved my life was Sergeant Shreves, former Green Beret, now retired. But yeah, Sergeant Gray was a hero. And unfortunately, nobody gets to know the acts of these people who are in security of the mind-altering research study and all these other just completely crazy projects that makes the stuff you see in the movies, that's kindergarten compared to what they really do. And some of these movies and things like that are inspired or based on events that actually happened within the realms of military intelligence or special ops or something like that. Of course, that's never allowed to be acknowledged to the public. They couldn't do it. They talk about classified, secret, top secret, above top secret, eyes only, need to know. Even some might be above the president's pay grade. Who knows? Like, I'm sure there's a lot of things they don't want this idiot Biden to know about. Apparently Reagan knew a lot, and Bush damn sure knew a lot. Matter of fact, I don't remember the exact details now, but there was an event that happened where Dr. Gorman actually got out of control. Now, when I was in the mind-altering research study, that was during Uncle Ronnie's administration. President Reagan, we called him Uncle Ronnie. And whatever happened in this particular incident, and Sergeant Gray confirmed this, what I remembered, he confirmed that Dr. Gorman was doing things and it was just completely out of control. When the guys tried to step in to stop him, he produced some paperwork, whatever, and said, hey, I can do this. You guys can't do anything. Well, it got further and further and further out of hand. I'm not sure right now, because those memories have faded, and sometimes I prefer to keep it that way to prevent the nightmares from coming back again. But I'm not sure if some guys died or got brain fried or it was just getting too intense. And paperwork being what it is, legally, without taking a chance on messing up your career, these guys couldn't step in. Somebody made a phone call. A few hours later, guess who showed up? Guess who came walking through the door? Dr. Gorman's eyes got about that big. Vice President George Bush. That's right. It got so bad that Vice President Bush had to come in. And Dr. Gorman was like, oh, God. It's like, yeah. And they told him what happened, showing the videos. And I'm trying to have a hard time remembering, but it was something like Vice President Bush told Gorman, if you ever pull anything like this again, something to the effect, I don't remember the exact words, but something to the effect like you'll end up in 10 different states or whatever it was. But he threatened him with something very, very serious. And he got Gorman's attention. Probably just for a short span. because before too long, Dr. Gorman was right up to his old tricks again. Yes, actually, one night, Vice President George Bush had to show up down at Fort Bragg. And, things get that bad when the Vice President of the United States has to show up because some twisted, whacked out, mind control doctor for these projects that officially don't even exist. Vice President's got to show up. But, yeah, Sergeant Gray was one of the unsung heroes, along with General Benary, General Sperry, General Moore, who they called Tiny. Big man. Sergeant Shreves. And there was others that kind of slipped my mind at this time. But yeah, Sergeant Gray more than once cold cocked Dr. Gorman, knocked him on his ass, and the guys from security who were all Green Berets, and some guys they brought in from other special ops unit, but they're either Green Berets or Air Force Special Forces. And these guys had to step in multiple times. Sergeant Gray was one of them. As a matter of fact, one particular incident, and this particular incident that happened had to do with a crossbow. Now, at this time that I was getting this memory back, I never knew that such ballistic stuff existed. And then many years later, after I started getting my memory back, I was talking to guys that I knew who had been around, guns their entire life, and guys that either were in or knew guys in law enforcement, and they knew all kinds of things, and they confirmed that this stuff existed. That I remembered that at that time I had no idea what it was. And what it was, this particular incident, had to do with mechanical advice that had a bolt in it from what folks would call a crossbow. This mechanical advice, it was a lever thing, and it clicked down like that, and they put a bolt in there. And they had some kind of way of adjusting the power on how much thrust would be thrust forward. And they had a clear piece of gel, and it was probably about, I want to say maybe this long, maybe a little longer, and my shelves are about this wide, and the thing is about this tall. And what this particular test involved in is at the end of where this gel was, you had to stand in front of it, literally about this close. Like this would be the gel, and we'd stand this close. And they had it down to a science, regardless of what the power was, exactly how far that bolt would go. And they had it down to a science where it would stop a 1/4 inch from the end. But for safety measures, they put a piece of safety glass at the end of it. And the safety glass would have probably been about as thick as this book. Half inch or so. And anyway, all the different test subjects were going through. They always said, remember now, no fear. And so they stand right in front. You see this arrow coming straight at you. And anyway, what had happened was Dr. Gorman was running that test and just nonchalantly, okay, next. Test side would go up through, no fear. Okay, you passed. Next. Few people did. And then the guys got distracted at the time I was coming up to do the test. Unbeknownst to the guys, Dr. Gorman went up there and turned up the power on that bolt. And I went up there, and that thing came forward, went further than it was supposed to, hit that safety glass, and spiderwebbed it. And the general, I can't remember if it was General Benary or General Sperry, one of the two. And he said, "You son of a bitch." And he grabbed him and he threw him up against the wall with his hands around his neck. And Gorman was screaming and hollering and all that. And he heard a voice behind him. He said, "General?" And there was old Sergeant Shreves, with a crossbow like that, aimed at him. So the general had his hands on his throat like this, turned around, saw that, without turning his head, just turned his body around and said, "Do you intend to shoot a general officer?" He said, "No, sir." Kind of looked at him. And Sergeant Shreves says, "Sir, would you please step aside so I can get a clear shot at Dr. Gorman?" "Oh, sure." So Sergeant Shreves sidestepped, never missing, never taking his eye off the scope. Well, Gorman's leaned up against the wall going like that. And anyway, his white schmuck that those guys had was turned up like that. And Shreves fired one of those bolts, went right through there. Basically pinned him to the wall. He's like, "Ah!" Well, then a couple of security guys, went and grabbed Gorman, held him up against the wall on his shoulder and his arm. Well, Shreves just started grabbing bolts out of the can, and he was shooting right next to his head, over like that. Well, Gorman apparently had this earring. This is what Sergeant Gray told me. Had a round earring he used to wear in his ear, and it was turned. Shreves put one right through the center of that thing. Now, he wasn't that far away, like from 6-7 feet away. And all those guys were expert marksmen anyway. And he goes, "Damn, I missed. I never miss." Kind of joking around. Put a couple more close by. Then he is down to his last bolt, and real slow like, he put one in there, cocked it, leveled it right at Gorman's forehead. And then he said, "Sir, all you have to do is give me the firing order, and no one will ever have to be subjected to Dr. Gorman ever again." Well, Sergeant Gray was in charge of the NCOs. And the general said, "You can't let him do that." And he said, "Well, yeah." He said, "As much as I'd like to, Shreves, I think it'd be best if we just stand down." "Your call, sir." Safety the crossbow, handed it to him. Picked up my hat, my cover, put it on me. Said, "Come on, let's go." Walked me out down the hall to the break room. The general just stood there looking at Gorman with all those arrows around him, all those bolts, and just shook his head and said, "You son of a bitch." So anyway, down at the break room, and Shreves was just kind of sitting there like this on the table, and I was sitting there just all zoned out, because I was under that mind-altering stuff. Anyway, a couple of guys walked in. Said, "Whoa, Shreves, things got pretty intense in there today." He goes, "Yeah, they did." He said, "None of us like this detail, but we noticed that whenever," in reference to me, he said, "whenever he goes up during testing day, you seem to get a little bit more on edge than when anybody else goes in the testing. What's up?" He said, "Well, before I came to Special Forces, me and him were over at COSCOM, 503rd Maintenance. We were in the same platoon. As a matter of fact, he was the only guy that came to my graduation the day that I graduated Special Forces. I just kind of went, oh. So I think it was at that time that Shreves had got pulled off security, at least when Gorman was running the show. Now, they had some other doctors. They had Dr. Peterson, and they had a lady doctor, Dr. Eldermore, and I think her married name at one time was Perkins. But when they ran the show, Shreves could be there. But when Gorman ran the show, Shreves was not allowed to be there because they knew next time he got out of line that Shreves wasn't going to ask for permission. And then they were going to have to explain that. But there was a number of cases out there where things had got out of line. One in particular, there was some kind of water test. They were big on these water tests. I don't know why. But there was some kind of a pool that we were at. And Dr. Eldermore, the lady, was running this test this day. Some kind of breathing thing. And they had us in the water. And there was several of us. And her and the technicians were watching the monitors. And the security guys, some were just kicking back in lounge chairs. And Sergeant Gray and one of the generals, General Benary or Sperry or one of them, was kind of just slowly, nonchalantly walking around the pool. Everything was nice and calm. Well, then Dr. Gorman comes bursting through the door. He wasn't supposed to be there that day. He come bursting through the door, had a 5-gallon bucket, about like this. This is a 7-gallon bucket. He had a bucket about like that. With several water moccasins in it. He come bursting through the door, threw them in the pool with us in it. And everything went ballistic. And the guys were scrambling to get us out, and they had these long poles, and they were trying to push the snakes away while they're getting us out. And then security personnel or the general himself, they start chasing Gorman around the pool. Well, he slipped, and he ended up in the water and got bit by the snakes. And finally they got him out, and General said, we need to get him medical attention. He said, Sergeant Gray said, he can die as far as I'm concerned. Where's the effect? They say, we can't deny him any medical treatment. He said, sir, as far as I'm concerned, he just tried to kill several soldiers. I am not going to give him anything. Well, then the general wanted the medical people to get it. The medical people there who witnessed what happened, they refused to work on him. Disobey orders, be damned, we don't care. They refused to work on him. They had to medevac him back to main post or to wherever it was. And these people that didn't really know the situation, they went ahead and went to work on him. But the people that witnessed it refused to. Sergeant Gray initiated that. He said, nope, I'm not ordering my guys to do a damn thing. Hell with him. And that was just one of many occasions that Sergeant Gray stepped up against the sinister Dr. Gorman. Are there real-life Dr. Frankensteins and Dr. Moreaus out there? Yeah. And unfortunately, they're employed by the federal government, getting a paycheck from the Department of U.S. Treasury. And one of those was Dr. Gorman. One of those sadistic people that was getting a paycheck from the Department of U.S. Treasury for committing heinous, sadistic tests on U.S. soldiers and other service members. It was all sanctioned by the higher up under the cloak of secrecy. Because to my understanding, the mind-altering research study One part of it was level 3 above top secret, and the other part, the more sadistic stuff, was level 4 above top secret. Only those who were on a need to know basis were allowed to know. Now, before I jump off here, a number of years ago, a lady I met where I work at one time, she had been in the Air Force. And I got to talking to her about some of the stuff that happened to me. She said, well, she had a friend that worked at the Pentagon at the time, and he might be able to find out something. So I gave her some basic information, gave her my name and name of the project and where I was at, time, and all that. So she called her friend and she gave him some basic information. Now, this guy worked inside the Pentagon, so he could get access to things that most people couldn't have access to. He goes, okay, I'll check and see what I can find out. So he started typing in, started checking up on stuff. In a matter of no time, all of a sudden, he had Big Brass walk into his office asking what in the heck was he doing. He realized something was up and goes, oh, I'm just doing my own research on some stuff. And they told him, they said, if you value your career, you will never try and access that stuff ever again. That's how highly classified, that is how closely guarded everything about the mind-altering research study still is to this day. Now, the project was shut down in 1990 because of the incident in the barracks. This is 2001. This is over 30 years later. Over 30 years later, and that is still closely guarded. I've often wondered, how thick is my black file? I can't speak for any of the other test subjects, those who are still alive. But mine in particular, when I used to get loaned out, they might call it, but I call it hoard out, to all these other different agencies or echelons of the military when they were doing different kinds of testing, like Project Whale, Project Zombie, Project Dark Satan, and a number of these projects where just stuff that was so beyond the realms of the average human imagination, most people would choose not to believe it. Some of these movies they have made about some pretty bizarre stuff are inspired by events, yes, that did actually happen. And that's why they went to great extents to wipe out our memory, those that survived it. And those that came out of their sedative state while it was going on did their best to make sure some of these guys never remembered. And unfortunately, people like me did remember. I got gobs of blank spots, but I got other spots that I remember pretty well. And it was a very trying time, those years when it all started coming back in June of 2004. And unfortunately, the lady I was with at the time, Dorothy Jean, who was Sergeant Gray's niece, she couldn't deal with it anymore. And so she bailed on me, which I don't blame her. And I told her that. I don't blame her. The way she went about it, she could have went that a little better, but I don't blame the kid. But anyway, for the family of Sergeant Gray, I just wanted to let you know. Sergeant Gray is gone now, so there's nothing they can do to him. Sergeant Gray never told you anything. But I'm just letting y'all know. Sergeant Gray, your brother, your dad, your uncle, was one of the unsung heroes that we never get to hear about. He stepped up when somebody needed to step up. And the consequences be damned. Because of sinister people like Dr. Gorman, who never should have been employed by the federal government And these projects, like the mind altering research study, should have never been approved in the first place. And I told Sergeant Gray's sister that one of these days I would make a video and send it to him. So after I get this video uploaded, I'm going to send it. I just wanted to let you know. Your brother, your uncle, and your father, he was a hero. He was my hero. Thank you for watching.